I have so many stories from this area. So it's called Crato, and I was in Crato A or B. I don't remember which one came first, but I served in both. So I'm just like, I served in that city. I served in Crato. And so getting there, oh man, so many memories. I remember we were all super excited though, because at the first zone conference, I'd met two of the sisters who were getting transferred down with us. And one was American and one was Brazilian, but she spoke perfect English. And they would become companions later on down the road. But I remember I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to be their companions. They're so cool. And mostly it was because they spoke English. And I was just like, it was like my third week in the mission. I was just like, oh, but they seem so cool. Like, I'd really like to be their companions one day. And so I remember like after 4 transfers, I was just like, okay, I'll probably stay here at least one more transfer in Benfica because my trainer was going home. Like, she'd finished her mission. I was like, well, I'll probably stay here at least one more, like transition a new sister in, and then I'll go out. I remember we get the call, and our district leader sometimes liked to play jokes on us with transfer calls. And so he like told all the other sisters where they were going, and I'm like, Elder, what about me? And he's like, well, sister, do you like the heat? And I was like, well, duh, we live in Brazil. Like, why wouldn't I be used to it at least? And he's like, no, do you really like it? And I was like, yes, Elder. Why? And he's like, because you're going to Crato in the Zona Juazeiro. And I was just like, where? Because, you know, I never paid attention because it was an only elder zone. And so, like, all 3 of the sisters just turned and looked at me. They're like, oh, you're going to Crato? And I was like, yep. Woohoo. And then when we got off the phone, like, it was then that they told me that we were opening an area that had only been elders before. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I got really excited. And so I got to the mission office, and I found out that my companion was one of these sisters that I had met, Sister Kereshi's. And so we all hop on the bus. She was the only Brazilian. The rest of us were American. So I had 4 transfers in the mission. The other sister had 1. And then the other American and that Brazilian, so Sister Kereshi's and Sister McMullen, Sister Kereshi's had trained her. And so they sat together and talked, and then we sat together. We just talked and we rode, and we got to sleep in. But it was just crazy because, like, we kept driving and we kept driving. We're like, are we there yet? And because nobody told us how far it was. We just knew it was like at the bottom of the state. And so we kept driving. And all of a sudden we started seeing like mountains and trees, because Fortaleza is right on the ocean. And so they had some mountains, but they were like really far away. But we were like all of a sudden just driving past them. And I'm like, that was a mountain. And so like we get there. And I remember we pulled up into the city. And it was so small compared to what I had been used to, because Fortaleza has like millions of people. And we went to a city of 100,000, which is like a huge difference. It's still really big. Like, my hometown has 7,500 people. So it was still huge, but I was just driving. I was like, where are we? It was like the same feeling when I got to São Paulo. I was just like, are we in a different part of Brazil? Like, what happened? And so it was actually really funny because they told us we were going to Crato. And so we got off in Crato, and we get to the bus station, and there's like nobody to meet us, and we're just wandering around. We're like, where do we go? And luckily this member had been he'd been dropping something off at the bus station. He's like, sisters, why are you here? And we're like, well, you know, this is our area now. He's like, no, you're supposed to be in Juazeiro, like in the other city at the bus stop. Like, there's people waiting for you there. And we're like, say what? And so like apparently the elders did not. There was lots of stuff going on, and they may have told us, but in my mind, I don't remember them telling us to get off in Juazeiro. We got off in Crato, because that's where we were going. And so in Juazeiro, apparently they had like half of the ward waiting for us, and there were people to give us rides home, and it was crazy. So I remember we just like he called the branch president, and we piled all of our stuff into their cars, and they drove us to our apartment. It was crazy, but it's the people there are so sweet, so great. It's a very Catholic region, but oh my gosh, I feel like I left half of my heart in that city. They are so open. By the time I left, like, I knew pretty much everybody because we'd walk past them on the street all the time. But it was there that people really started. They were like, hey, how's it going? Like, come over, come tell us what you're learning about. Or we could just like stop a person on the street and be like, hey, I really like your shoes or your necklace or something, where'd you get it? And it would just start like this full-fledged conversation, and they would just like share things about their life on the like in the first few minutes, and I'm like, this is really cool. And there were some people who lived in like a richer area or who had nicer houses, but a majority of them like would live way below what we consider the poverty line here, and a lot of them were so poor. But they were really humble, and they were just so happy with what they had. I remember one of my favorite families to teach. The wife was a less active, and so the two sisters before me, before I got transferred to the other side, they went to they started working with them, and then I got put there, and that was we were working on baptizing our husband and our daughter, and they were so poor. They had the living room, and there was a hammock and a table with chairs, and you go up and there was like a bed in one room, and then they had finally had enough money to get like their daughter's own room, but their bathroom was outside, and like it was just like looking at it from the outside, it's a house that you would probably say, I'd never ever want to go in that house, but like they hardly ever had chairs to sit on, or like they didn't really have a lot of money, but when we would go there, they would be so happy to just like have us in their house and to have us sitting there and to like talk with us and to learn about the gospel. And oh my gosh, so many good memories in that house. But I was so amazed because like sometimes we'd walk into people's houses and they'd just be like dirt floors or like a ceramic floor, because everybody has like ceramic or tile, but there'd be like one or two chairs, or they would have like nothing in their cupboards, but they would like still want to give everything to us. And so it was very eye-opening, because I realized that like, especially when I got home, I was like, I don't need like half of the stuff that I have. Like all of these people have so little, but they're so happy. Like I need to strive to be more like them. And so they are some of my most favorite people in the whole entire world. And we walked all over that city, and we very rarely met any rude people. Like there's only one or two that I can remember that were just like, no, and like tried to tell us the church was wrong and yelled at us. And so they're at least considerate enough to talk to you about your message. And they may or may not tell you that you're wrong, which you know you're not, but they are so great. There's so many memories in that city. I went through I was in one area of that city for 2 transfers, and then I was in the next area for the next 5 transfers. So we went through a lot of sisters, but there were just so many things. I remember one time in my first area, we were walking. It was like the first week, and the first night, we kind of may have broke the rules, because we had the 16-year-old boy like take us places, because we had no idea where anything was. And so like he took us to the investigators' houses, and we had a couple teaching records, and so I remember like we were still kind of getting the hang of things one night, and we were walking home, and we'd gone to meet this contact that we'd made on a bus, and I don't remember if they were home or not. But we were walking down the street, and it was like 8:40 or so, and it was like at least a 20-minute walk home if we didn't like fly. And so we're like, so they're like, okay, we gotta hurry, like we have to be home. And if you get home between 9 and 9:30, it's okay, but we tried really hard to be home at 9. And my companion and I, we were walking past this guy, and like our mission president told us, like we were trying to turn that, because we went to a district, so it just had branches. And so we were trying to turn that district into a stake and the branches into wards, and he's like, focus on men and families. We're like, we can do that. So we're walking down the street, and I remember like, we're just hurrying as fast as we can, because we're like scared to death if it's gonna take us forever. Because we were in a part of the city that we hadn't really been in before, and we're like, we want to make sure we get home on time. And we walked past this guy, and he's putting his car away for the night. And we both stopped and looked at each other, and we're like, we should make a contact with him. And then we're like, no, we can't. Like, we have to go home. Like, we're gonna be late. And so we keep walking, and we're like, no, we really should make a contact with him. And then we're like, I don't know. And I was like, well, sister, we really need to get home. And she's like, yeah, but we really need to make this contact. And I'm like, I know, what do we do? And we're like, I don't know. So like I was almost gonna start walking. I was like, well, we can come back tomorrow. And she's like, I'm gonna do it. And so she grabs we had this rule where we had to walk with the Book of Mormon in our hand all the time. And so she just like turns around, she's like, I'm gonna do it. And she just goes back to him. And she, I will never forget what she said. Like, instead of being like, hey, how's it going? She's just like, if I told you that there was a book that had all the answers to any question you could ever have in your life, would you read it? And he was like, well, yeah, I'd read it. And she's like, good, because it's the Book of Mormon. And she like had that cheesy like game show smile. And he looked at us and he's like, I have one of those. And we're like, say what? And like, we were like, no, really, like, this is a book. No, he's like, really, I have one at home. And we're like, this never happens. And so his name is Felipe. So Felipe and Sisera, I love them to death. But he told us that the elders had come to teach him like a year before. And they left the Book of Mormon, and then they never came back. And we think they both got transferred out because that's like, it's really weird to not do that. And so I remember we marked an appointment with him, scheduled, marked, whatever it is. And we came back and he pulled this Book of Mormon off of his shelf and he'd read through almost the entire thing waiting for the elders to come back. And so we were able to teach them, and they had to get married. So it took it took about 6 months for them to get married. But the whole entire time, like, he was a little bit easier to convert than his wife was, but I remember we invited him to church, and he was such an example to me. He's like, I can't come this Sunday because I already have plans, like, and I can't miss them, but I'll be there next Sunday. And since then, he's only missed like 1 or 2 Sundays, and I've been home for 2.5 years. And so like his wife came up to us, she's like, how'd you get him to do that? And I was like, do what? She's like, I've invited him to church like this whole time. And she went to the Assembly of God church, and she's like, he never comes to church with me, really. And I was like, we just invited him. And so it was really cool to see how the Spirit worked on him, because everything we taught him, like, he was like, okay, yeah, this is true. Like, I'm going to pray about it. Like, I'm going to do it. Like, I'm going to put this to the test. And I remember one time we were trying to get him to stop drinking, and like, we had a lesson with him, and he said he would stop drinking. And then the next time we had a lesson, he's like, so I went out to a bar at lunch with my friends, and like, bars in Brazil are like where people go to get food and stuff. It's not just strictly drinks. And I remember we just looked at each other. We're like, no, because he was doing so good. Anyway, he had prayed about it that night, because he usually always said the prayers at the end of the lesson. And then we were having that lesson, and he's like, so sisters, like, I wasn't going to do it, but I got a Coke and rum. And we were just like, Felipe, what are you doing? Like, why? And he's like, but it's the funniest thing that happened. And we're like, oh, okay, funny and alcohol usually aren't a very good mix. And he was telling us, he's like, I went to take a drink of it, and it just tasted sour. Like, I couldn't swallow it at all. Like, it tasted horrible. And so, like, I just had to put it back, and I just ordered a Coke. And I was like, go Felipe. And so it was amazing, because he definitely set the example for his family. Like, shortly after he started coming to church, his wife started coming. And she was a little more stubborn. I think I would have been like her if I was a convert to the church. Like, she questioned everything. She's like, well, why do I have to do this? Like, what's the importance of this? And so it's really cool, because we got like I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm going to follow it spiritual side. And we got the no, I want to know why I'm doing everything. Like, I'll do it, but I want to know the reason why. And so they are so great. And they were finally able to get married. And he served as the first counselor in the bishopric for a little bit. And they were so great. I love them. There's so many stories, so many people from those areas. But I remember in that area, it was also where I learned how to be bold, because my companion spoke English and Portuguese. And so whatever I couldn't say in one language, I could say in the other, and she would do the same thing. And so she's like, sister, it's okay to be bold. Like, it's okay to tell the people that they're wrong, like, that they're doing bad things, that they need to change. She's like, do it tactfully, but like, it's okay to tell them. And so we got to the point, because most Brazilians, they don't like to tell you no. Like, they're like, oh yeah, I'll do it. So we'd be like, well, will you read this? Like, yeah, I'll do it. No big deal. Hey, will you come to church? Yeah, I'll be there. Like, si Deus quiser. That's what they said a lot. Like, if God wants it. And we're like, that's why he said us. He wants you at church. And so they would just do all of those things. And I remember like, there was this one person who was leading us on and leading us on. And we're like, you know, are you going to do it or not? And they're like, well, yeah, I'll do it. And my companion, she was just like, okay, there's no yes or no. Or, I mean, no maybe. It's yes or it's no. Like, if you're going to do it, awesome. If not, don't waste our time because we have other people we could go be teaching. And I was like, wow. And so from then on, like, we were just, with the people, we're like, you know, we love you and we will be here for you whenever you need help. But if you're not going to do it, like, just tell us. Be honest with us. And as soon as we started doing that, people were just like, you know, I'm not really interested. We're like, thank you for saving our time. Like, we're sorry that you don't want the gospel. Like, and we would testify of the blessings. But we're like, you know what? Thank you for not wasting our time. Thank you for letting us have this time to go find other people to teach. And like, in doing that, we actually found another family, a Parecida and her husband. I don't remember his name, but we stopped and we only had 2 lessons with them, but we went to teach them, I remember. And I was really glad that we could be bold with them because we had such a good feeling about this family. And so we talked to them a little bit about the gospel, about the Book of Mormon, like the Restoration and condensed version. And we gave them a Book of Mormon and asked them to read 1 Nephi 8. And they said, okay, but he was very much into like another church and he didn't want to be led astray. And we're like, you know, like, we're not leading you astray. Like, this chapter will help you, like, understand the path that we're trying to help you go down. And I remember, like, we left and we're like, oh my gosh, they are so good. So good. And we went back the next day and we're like, okay, so did you read? And they're like, yeah, we read the whole entire chapter. And we're like, yes, because, you know, we were excited. And we're like, well, which part stuck out to you? And I remember he said, you know, the part about the cloud of darkness surrounding them. And we're like, okay. Like, well, why did that stick out to you? He's like, because that's what I feel like you guys are doing to me. And we're like, what? And he's like, yeah, I feel like you guys are trying to confuse me and pull me off the right path that I'm already on. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm just like, excuse me, buddy. Like, I did not travel like 5,000 miles to lie to you. And so we talked to him about it for a little bit. And like, his wife, I very much appreciate her because she was, even though we could tell she wanted to learn a little bit more, like, she was very supportive of her husband. She's like, no, you know, we're married. Like, I should support him. And so they ended up not wanting to meet with us anymore. But at the very end of the lesson, like, because my companion had taught me to be so bold, we were just like, you know what? Like, this is the truth. Like, this, what we're teaching you is true. And if you feel like this, like, it's obviously Satan trying to lead you astray. So when you feel like praying about it, like really praying about it and finding out more, like, you know where to find us. But they were such a great family. Like, he said the prayer at the end of one of the lessons, and I've hardly ever felt the Spirit so strong in the first time prayer. Like, it was so cool. But so many good stories. Sorry.